Okay, super. So welcome back, everyone. This is day 8 of our overall What School Could Be Academy sprint. And today we focus on bringing our assessment conversation to sort of a bigger picture system level. And so we're going to do a couple of different things that get us start to think system level. And we're going to hopefully leave on a very hopeful tone today. That is my goal. If we're not leaving pretty hopeful, I feel like I have messed up and done something wrong. So, okay. Now, lots of pictures. If you've not been following along over on Twitter land, there is amazing stuff going on. Oh, which screen am I sharing? Yep, good. So lots of great images. The What School Could Be has a lounge out there. Everyone's just getting to hang out with Ben. So like looks like it's been awesome out there. So congrats.
It's been so great to see people just, coming up and saying hello. And it's been actually the highlight of my time here, because I've been in meetings most of the entire conference. I haven't actually been able to attend the conference, but the meeting everybody has been so cool. And it's funny because some people I met last July when I was there in Kentucky, Justin, and I popped in one of your days. So that's also been super fun.
Yeah, lovely. Awesome. I know some folks have asked about like other conferences, and I did get some more detail about a conference coming up for us in Northern Kentucky. It's shaping up, looking pretty good. Actually, What School Could Be is going to be there at that conference in Northern Kentucky as well, and in one of our regional co-ops. Some of the team in the upper left. That's actually a mixture of CKC and Northern Kentucky's teams. But anyway, all fine. We got some details coming up about when you can do some of that conference work.
And also,
okay.
we just have to mention, if we're talking conferences, Justin, there is a conference happening in May that I want to invite you all to, that is in Bangkok. And if you're looking for an excuse to come to Thailand, it's a 21st Century Learning International Conference. It's one of the premier conferences it's actually probably the premier conference in Asia. And Justin and Jason, Dr. Jason Richardson, and myself will be there as in What School Could Be as a sponsor. Justin and I and Jason will be running a pre-conference on leadership for deeper learning. And there's going to be all sorts of really cool stuff happening. So I'll put it in the chat just in case you want to check it out, if you need an excuse to come to Thailand.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited, honestly. Jason is my co-author. We write lots of stuff together. And he might pop in on the last group of sprints ahead as we turn our attention more to the leadership side of this. But yeah, we'll be out there doing some stuff. I think Kapono is planning to be on the ground in Bangkok as well. And so some of the team will be out there. All right, Padlet. We, as always, rock and roll. I have filled today's Padlet with tons of resources because there's no way that we can cover everything that I would love to cover about like mastery-based learning and transcripts. And oh my gosh, there's so many things. We can't cover them all. So I put a bunch in the Padlet. So today in particular is a useful day to just look through and all those different resources. Now we're getting to a stage in the overall journey with assessment that as we take Kentucky districts down this journey all the time, one of the things that we have to help them do is to begin to see like, okay, I think we're learning assessment, exhibition, these pieces at an individual level, but how do you begin to bring them together into something that feels like a way to operate school? And so that's where we're at in our overall journey. So this is a sense of today's flow to get us a sense of that overall journey. Just as a quick refresh and reminder, where we've been during this particular sprint is really taking a deep look and getting some examples and hearing from like how exhibitions work at elementary and Painted Stone Elementary. So Painted Stone is actually an elementary school in Shelby County Schools, who's going to share more today about how this looks at the whole district level. So we've gotten to see at the elementary level what that looks and feels like, hear from kids. And now we're going to sort of see at the district level how that is operating. We talked student-led conferences. Last time on Tuesday, we took a deep dive into presentations of learning and my favorite simplified version from Francis Parker Charter Essential School. So just giving you a sense of that's the stuff we've been up to. Broader, bigger, really big picture vision here just to try to get everyone's head around this. Remember, we follow this theory of action. And it's the one we deeply recommend. during this sprint, we've been working our way backwards. Sprint number 1 was all about number 3. Sprint number 2 has been about performance assessment. And our last sprint coming up in 2 weeks is all about getting back to the graduate profile level and laying all the conditions for deeper learning to emerge. All the fun stuff I know is down in number 3, but intentionally we work our way to number 3. So that performance assessment structure now, though, needs to make sense with your portrait of a graduate. And so let me skip that one. I want to give Envision Learning Partners some love again. Justin and Alcine, who've been our partners in Kentucky for a very long time. This is an activity that I want to show you that has been useful for us as we at a school level begin to come to what at a school level would be our system of assessments. So show you like Justin Wells with Envision, who is the co-author of the book that we love as our playbook, has these things printed on big poster sticky notes that go on walls, right? So he'll bring a big poster sticky note, then it looks like this. Show me what your profile skills are, what are the projects that you're going to do, what are the assessments that you're going to do. All of that should dump into your portfolio, and then that should lead to your defense. Okay, get it sort of like, and then it's your job to fill all that in. Let me show you what that looks like. This is one that I did for STEAM Academy, a high school that we got to start in Lexington. You know, we have habits at STEAM. And so like we used our habits to speak to some of our major projects that then went to like our different sort of, this one was doing more reflection tools, but all of that then dumped into a portfolio that led to a defense. And I'm super excited. Actually, we just over the last couple of years at STEAM have finally got to the point of doing sort of serious gateway defenses at sophomore and senior year. So it took us a while to get there, but we're there, and it helps to do some of this mapping. So I've created a updated modern version of Justin's effort. And this is where I want to jump us all out into discussion real fast. And you can feel free to make a copy of this. In fact, I should put one that forces a copy where you articulate your profile skills, your portrait of a graduate skills, and we're going to get there in our last sprint. So if you don't have those yet, that's fine. But I put a couple that show up all the time: collaboration, problem solving, empathy. So those skills show up all the time. So like if you don't have those skills yet, that's fine. Just play with those. But then what is the task that fits? So you can see like a food desert PBL. Okay, how does that link then to this sort of performance product that we see emerging? Okay, oh, there's going to be a mock trial on something, or the students are going to design a prototype, or they're going to create a play, or they're going to whatever, right? And then that shows you how the pieces are beginning to line up, all of which will dump into a portfolio. And then you can take that portfolio to an exhibition, student-led conferences, defense. Don't pay attention to the arrows right now. The arrows are there for you to move and play with. It's your job to make the arrows make sense in your own spaces. So just as a group right now, over in the Padlet, I want to, Ben, can you get us sort of teed up and ready to go to breakout rooms? You can see all the stuff I've got pulled up.
Sure.
There. Over in the Padlet, 3 at the most, Ben. I've got
3 people in each room, or 3 rooms?
3 rooms at the most.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got a Padlet teed up, or some Google Draws teed up where you can go and play with this. And the broader point is to discuss together the utility of how a school begins to see the overall system of performance assessments and projects and profile skills that all begin to work together. So that's where I want you to the discussion to be. Feel free to play with the tool, make a copy of the tool, any of that stuff.
All right. So I'm just going to create 2 rooms because we have not a ton of people. That'll give us about 6 people per room, which is our group's sort of sweet spot. But let's also acknowledge it is early. Justin, you jumped right into it. Like some people are still warming up.
It's a
So
sprint.
I know. But when we jump in the room, if you guys want to do like a little centering activity, we have an icebreaker on the Padlet. If you want to take like the first 3 minutes to just run through that to sort of like bring everybody into the right mindset. If you're still like me drinking your coffee and getting things going. So feel free to, just come together for the first minute or two and then jump into that. So we
Just
recognize that as early. Yeah.
a broad discussion about how schools begin to put together the pieces of projects and assessments, profile skills. That's where the broad discussion can be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. All right. Thanks.
We'll go for about 4 or 5. It's not super long. We don't have to like actually fully build this. We're just looking at it as a tool.
Cool. So let's see who has questions about process or what we're asking them to do. You can just come off mute and ask us if you'd like. Okay, then I will. People are like focused right now, Justin. I think you got everybody really quick.
Right. We're going, people. We're making progress.
I'm opening rooms now. Jump in. As always, I'll be here. You can pop out, ask me questions, etc. So,
hey Ben, yeah, we talked. Hi everyone. Good morning or afternoon. We just chatted about. I was interested in knowing more about the implementation of this in a district context. If it's, I use that term, the coalition of the willing, which comes from the instructional coaching world. If we pull in teachers who have an interest in this, or if we look at it another way, does some of this draw in teachers who maybe aren't doing PBL, and it's an opportunity for teachers to engage in PBL or performance assessment? So just asking that big question. And I think also, if I may speak for the group, the left column, the most left column got us, interested in thinking through some of the ideas of that we've been discussing through this lens of the portrait of a graduate.
cool. So you feel that a tool like this is helpful to like help facilitate a conversation with others about this?
Yeah, I think it helps map. It maps the work. It kind of reminds me of higher ed accreditation, actually. That's my background. And so
okay. All right.
That's kind of the accreditation process. So for me, it resonates that way of doing like big picture assessment in the broadest of ways. Okay. Yeah, I think it's great.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Justin, what did you hear?
It is similar to a lot of how we do higher ed, at least in colleges of ed. I don't know. I can't speak to how the medical school works, but we, in our principal program, for instance, like there are, in our case, about 7 to 8 different major anchor assessments, major projects that happen. And then those projects get distributed across the courses throughout the program. Different professors wind up having responsibility for different component parts. And then it all goes to a portfolio that eventually the student defends at the end. So in that way, yes, I think it is broadly reflective of something that looks more like a higher ed way of doing it in America anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly my experience, Justin. I was a chair of a Department of Ed for many years, and that's what we did, and it works. So I'm interested to apply it to the secondary level, which is my context now.
And I like the way that Francis Parker Charter Essential, they grouped into 2-year groupings. So 7-8 was a grouping, 9-10 was a grouping, 11-12 was a grouping. For us at STEAM, we've gone to 9-10 as a grouping, 11-12 as a grouping, and essentially mapped this thing over a 2-year span. And then there's a gateway, right? That's exactly how both STEAM Now and Francis Parker Charter Essential is setting up little mini higher ed packages inside of a high school. Okay, I'm glad that you're interested in the left-hand column. The left-hand column, those portrait of a graduate skills, is where I really want you to see that this now has a critical role to play. And one of the things I think lots of schools get wrong is they just rush off into a portrait of a graduate because they're excited to like create a new graphic and put it on their website and get the school board to feel good about themselves. But they don't really know why they're doing it. And so by going backwards like this, I hope now we'll begin to give you a deeper sense of why they're doing it. And I want to briefly introduce you to, with like a 1-minute video, to competency-based systems, because now we're starting to put a system in place. This feels bigger, right? This is not just what's happening in a classroom. This is now what's happening at a school, and it can even be what's happening at a district. And so I want to introduce competency-based systems and then introduce you to Shelby County, who put a big effort into trying to go down this road. All right, real briefly then into a competency-based video, and then over to Shelby County. All right, here we go first.
Traditional schools aren't designed to help students master material. Everyone goes to school from September to June, and some people get an A and some people get an F.
We want all of our students not to just rush them across the stage, but we want them to leave here with mastery in all academic skills.
Moving toward competency-based education is a much better model.
In a competency-based system, it's all about the learning.
It's not so much about seat time, but show us what you know, and we'll master those skills, or we'll teach you the skills that you need.
You want to be able to say to them on a rubric, you mastered these skills at this level, so that they really know where they're at before they go to college or career.
Assessment is more frequent and more formative. One of the biggest skills students gain is that ability to self-assess and to really take responsibility for their learning.
And in that way, instead of the time being constant and the learning being variable, we flip that around and the learning is constant. Everyone leaves college ready, everyone leaves at a certain learning point, but the time's variable.
I feel that our students are better prepared for life after high school with this approach.
All right, awesome. Let's pause that real fast and then turn you all. Shelby has their own slides, and I think Laura and Susan, I've made you all co-host. So let me stop, and as one of you all can pop up slides if you want as I introduce. So 3 Shelby County folks are in the room with us today. James Nyhoff is the recently retired / got a new job leading deeper learning regionally superintendent of Shelby County Schools, and James now leads a regional, our largest geographic region, I think, is led by James in Kentucky, in our sort of western area around Bowling Green, Kentucky. I don't know if anyone knows or cares about the layout of our state, but anyway, James is helping to lead a deeper learning regional team now, and they're out at San Diego. So thanks, James, for waking up super early this morning and joining from San Diego. And then,
thank you. Glad to be a part of it.
Okay, right. So his chief academic officer is Susan Dougal, and Susan led a lot of this build, and so I'm sure is going to help share a lot of the story. And then Laura Shields was the educator-facing leader. So all of the professional development that was building and running around the implementation of this entire model was being led by Laura. And so James is off leading his own team in West Kentucky, but Susan Dougal and Laura have both signed up for Team Next Gen. And so they both now sort of work on Team Next Gen here across the state. And now they lead professional development for us statewide. But we're going to sort of go back in time a year or two to talk about, well, even more than that. Susan, you can say more, to talk about sort of the development of a district-wide approach to this.
Okay, Laura is going to start us off. Laura.
All righty. We're just going to talk about our journey, because I think the one thing to remember is to listen for how long this journey is. It doesn't happen immediately, and there are lots of layers coming in as we go. So I think today we would like to focus on how we in Shelby County designed that performance assessment system, the strategic planning that went into that, and then the tools that we developed that really were needed in order to support the system, needed for clarity and needed to know if we were getting there.
So when Laura and I started planning this, we were trying to decide how in depth to go, but we know it's a sprint. So we're going to kind of go through our journey at a high level because we could talk for days about this. And then at the end, leave time for questions. So as we're talking and sharing, if you'll just take some notes about specifics, if there's anything you want us to go a little deeper in. So if you look at the screen, this is a continuum that I developed after the process, but it does reflect our process of the Portrait of a Learner implementation continuum. We're starting there because that is really what kickstarted the performance assessment system. There was some great things that foundationally that built up to the portrait and some purposes and visioning before that, but this is what really moved us into the performance assessment system. So you can just see there that the first few parts of that, the development of the portrait and the publishing of that and communicating with all the stakeholders comes first, but we often call that now the end of the beginning. So we found that the next step was the development of performance assessment system. Some people may start with that instructional design phase. And when you look at this next slide, which is a more detailed continuum, it looks on paper to be linear, but it's really not. You could probably go across this continuum and look for things that you're already doing in your district. But the point of the continuum is to really think about what is the normal sequence of development that happens over time in a more robust way, instead of this here and that there and all those things. Although, for instance, if you're already doing student-led conferences or work-based learning or some of the things you might see in there, that makes it easier to connect to what you're already doing. So this is the continuum we use. So today we're going to focus on this development of performance assessment system. And now after the fact, as we reflect on our processes and now what Laura and I do and Dr. Nyhoff, what we do across the state is help people to develop this system. And oftentimes it includes performance outcomes, rubrics, student-led conferences, performance tasks, exhibitions, defenses. So not only the events of performance, but also the tools that support that and the professional learning as well. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that. This is the Shelby County profile of a graduate. So when we developed this in 17-18, we went through a design process with our community. I think that Justin said that you're going to talk a little bit about this in the upcoming sprint sessions. But we went through a design process and had lots of feedback, and we can go into depth about that creation, but it was probably an 8-month process from beginning to end. To develop what we have here as our profile. And I am happy to report that that profile is still being used in classrooms now. So this was the beginning, as I said before, but what really made this happen systemically, and in our breakout room earlier, that question was asked about how can you develop this at a district level? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at it from a district perspective. And so this, I know you can't read that print. We're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, the structure, and then we'll zoom in to some of the print. As you see up in the left-hand side, up in the top, that's the profile, and that is the North Star and the vision for this plan. By 2022, our goal was to have all students showing mastery of these competencies as they graduate high school. And as you know, lots of people call the profile different things. We decided intentionally to call it the profile of a graduate at that point in time, because from our community, they wanted us to determine what competency students would have when they leave high school. So as a graduate, we built systems to measure those competencies all along the way, but that is why we call it profile of a graduate. So when you look at the way that this is developed, Dr. Nyhoff was our superintendent and a wonderful resource for strategic planning. So we were blessed to be a part of his team and learn from him that way. But as you can see on the left, there were 3 parts to this plan, and all 3 are extremely important strategically to make this happen. First was personalized learning, and much of that was my responsibility to make sure those things happened over that 4-year period. It was around defending competencies and demonstrating those, equity, and equipping our students for the present and the future. And then the middle section, the talent development, was how were we going to equip our educators and staff to support that personalized learning. And Laura, as a staff developer, was a part of that. So the actions in talent development were intentionally chosen to prepare the educators and staff members to do what was asked of them in the red section. And then the culture of excellence was more of an infrastructure, the organizational, operational things that had to happen in the school district. How did the scheduling have to change? The financial department, the transportation, the cafeteria. How did all of that have to change to, again, support personalized learning? So when we talk about strategic, it was very strategic on all levels. Laura, anything to add about that overall structure, or Dr. Nyhoff, anything?
The only thing, what I'm going to say, one of my big things as a professional learning coordinator was to help teachers understand how students were learning by learning that way themselves. And so we tried to have that parallel practice and help them to feel what it felt like to have personalized professional learning, for example, or to reflect on where they were in meeting a teacher standard and exhibit about that. And so we tried to really have that parallel track going on for them as learners.
I'll just jump in and say 3 things. The first one is a session I was in yesterday. They asked us to draw a sketch of how we see ourselves as a learner. And so in my sketch, I drew a zipper where my mouth was supposed to be, so that I will be a better listener and keep my mouth shut. So I really enjoyed hearing how Susan, I always enjoy hearing how Susan explains the process, because sometimes what I had in mind and what people experienced weren't exactly aligned. I will say this, and I know this session isn't about strategic planning, but I will say that if you look at the strategic planning idea, narrowing something down to 3 big themes is really magical from the strategic planning side. So, personalized learning, talent development, culture of excellence would flow off of all of our leadership team's tongue on a regular basis. We would talk about those 3 big themes. Then those strands underneath them, you would regularly hear Susan, for example. She was in charge of the red section. So you'd regularly hear Susan talking in all of her meetings, whoever she was interacting with, about those strands, and she would be naming those specific things and holding people accountable in a gentle way, but holding people accountable for their things they're responsible for in the small print that she was referencing earlier. So that's it.
Thank you for sharing. So we are going to zoom in, especially on this part, because we want to look at the scaffolded way we built the performance assessment system. So if you look across these bullets for the first 2 years, especially toward the top, you will see that in the very first year, we rolled out the profile to all teachers, and educators and community members, all stakeholders. And the actions of the first year were pretty broad. You'll see that we provided embedded performance assessments. It was very broad and open for our teachers to start using performance assessment. Later on, if you want to go to the Shelby County, Kentucky School website, you can see this plan with all the strategic plans that are on that site, and see that the talent development section, teachers were learning about quality performance assessment, QPA, and I think I saw something linked on the Padlet from CCE about that. So they were getting training, starting to embed, but it was, just trying to learn as we go. You also saw we start to develop tools to reflect the profile and really describe what those were at each level. And then the fourth bullet, we began defenses of learning for seniors. And that is very broad because we needed to define that with our schools. At the time, we have 2 high schools, and they needed to define who those seniors were. As you can see, if you go over to the next year in 1920, it said expand defense of learning for seniors. So it didn't define the numbers or the pilot or how, but just knowing that it was going to grow. And as you look down, you can see a couple of other things that are listed there that kind of reference that. But it was very intentional about how we were doing those kinds of things. You also start to see some things about scheduling philosophies and project-based learning. And just that first year, we were just dipping our toes in lots of things or expanding on things from the prior years. Before this, we had another 4-year plan that happened building up to the profile. So this was the last 2 years of that plan. And you see that they're continuing to provide embedded performance assessment, starting to reflect and revise on those competencies. And then in 2021, we began the defensive learning for transition levels, fully implemented defensive learning for seniors. So when this was published, high school principals and teachers knew in 20 and 21, all seniors would defend. So that helped them decide who would defend the 2 years before, because they could build up to that and what was best for their schools to do that. And then you start to see that we began that defensive learning for transition levels in 2021. All elementary and middle school principals knew that was going to happen, so they began to do it earlier. So just giving them those benchmarks and markers actually many times helped them start to think to do those things in prior years to get ready and start the learning as adults. Another big thing you'll see that goes across here is about advisory structures. We built advisory structures and advisory policies over those 4 years, so that now still that there are advisory structures in every school. Every kid has an advisor who helps them with collection and curation of artifacts and evidence, but they also help them with social emotional, with academic goals, lots of things that happen there. The other key is when you think about what happened in 2020 and what was supposed to happen on our strategic leadership plan, even when we were virtual, the plan continued. And we still continued to see, not everyone, but many of our schools doing their defenses and staying on track. So having this plan really helped us move through that period of time when we were not in person. Anything you want to add, Dr. Nyhoff or Laura?
Nothing from me.
Nope, you're good.
Okay. Also, a little farther down at the bottom, you see here it's transition plans, competency-based education, student transition plans. Those were when we started to add those defenses and looking at competencies and standards that we'll talk about in a second, deciding when students were ready to move based upon, and sometimes that was before 5th grade. So we had at this point in time, students who were exhibiting mastery above their grade level, moving on to do work at a different pace and a different place at a different time, sometimes even into other school buildings as needed. So this is just I included this article in here that we were asked to write about that assessment system. And what I like about it is really a collection of stories about those first years in exhibition and defenses. And you'll see lots of our people named and lots of our kids' pictures there. But the homegrown part is really important. In order to build that sustainability, it has to be co-created. When we talk about the design process, co-creation and inclusion of all stakeholders is crucial, because you'll notice when Justin introduced us, none of us are still in Shelby County Public Schools. But these things are still occurring, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So the important part is that you bring all the learners along, from preschool to principals to superintendents to everyone as you go, as you're creating. So it doesn't belong to one person or a group of leaders. It belongs to the community, and it's the expectation of the community. So if you get a chance, take a look at that just to see some of the great work our leaders were doing at that time. Now, Laura is going to talk about some foundational things that got us started.
Yes. So when Susan and I were looking at that continuum, and she talked earlier about it not being linear, I think an important piece that the district started back in 2008 was implementing the workshop model as the instructional delivery model. And so as a foundational piece, teachers were learning about this, and students were teachers were learning about this in professional learning in a workshop way, and students were learning in a workshop way. So they were, beginning with an inquiry question and beginning to figure out answers. And at the end of the lesson, they were reflecting not only on what they learned, but also what cognitive thinking strategies help them to learn. So you might hear them say, I was able to ask questions to figure out this answer that we were trying to figure out in math today. So they were not only using the strategies, but they were able to articulate and talk about how the strategies help them learn. So that little microcosm of an exhibition within every lesson helped build that where we were going for the big defense. So they did that kind of reflection and awareness about how they learned and what they learned every day. And then that led to things like, if you think about that within a lesson, then when they're sharing with parents in student-led conferences, like we talked about on Tuesday, they're able to use language to talk about their learning and to be clear about where they are and their targets for learning. And they're much more prepared to talk about that, because they do that every day within each lesson. And then that builds to larger exhibitions of learning as they have these meaningful longer-term projects. As Ben shared on Tuesday, these examples might look like they're at the end of the learning, but again, the exhibition sometimes happened in the midst of the learning and sharing how they were in the pathway of getting to their targets for learning. Anything else?
Laura, yeah, I was going to add. So last week you heard Principal Acklin or Tavia talk about exhibitions and how they got started. So one of the things that we implemented also for light accountability and sustainability was we did monthly meetings with principals where principals and their teams would set goals. And we would talk about, did you meet your goals? How are you tracking those goals? How can we help you? It's really how we could connect and give them the resources they needed to meet the goals. So in the last few years, one of those goals for every school has always been about profile of a graduate. And so many of the principals, to ensure that exhibitions kept happening when other things could have delayed that or stopped them from happening, the goals in every school, most every school, where every kid would exhibit at least once in the fall and once in the spring. And those began to just be a part of what they do. Sometimes they were in the classroom, sometimes they were at night, and sometimes they were at an outlet mall nearby. But that just is a
better
part.
parking. Better parking, right.
Yeah.
Parking is a real problem for exhibitions.
Yes, the parking is a problem. So then it started to be not this big culminating thing at the end, but it was a natural, authentic way for students to share their learning wherever it occurred during that process. So that still is just a part of what happens. I just had a meeting in Shelby County yesterday with the current CAO, and he texted me and said, hold on, I'm running late, I'm leaving exhibitions. So it's just part of what happens there.
If I could add just one thing, Laura began with talking about the workshop model as our instructional delivery model. There's some magic there that I want to make sure that we make the point of. At least I felt like there was. And that I'll start with this story. Shortly after Laura came to the district, we were meeting and she asked me this question. I mean, she's good at asking the question to draw out an answer you want to say, but you don't know you want to say it. And she said, so what's the district's instructional delivery model? And I paused and I kind of hem-hawed around and I said, well, I suppose workshop. And she said, well, then if that's where you're putting your energy, then you should name that and say, this is our instructional delivery model. And that was a big change just in the message, not in our practice, but in the message of leadership. We use the instructional delivery model of workshop because it is foundational to these other things that we're wanting to do together. So just the thoughtfulness and the logic of saying, here's what workshop does for us, in my mind, made a lot of sense and made workshop more effective and made all of the steps flow together. And, you know, thanks to Laura for that, for making sure that we were saying it, not just doing it.
So I think, James, you bring up a really good point, and like, let me jump in. Sorry, Susan and Laura, because I want to name some things I've been hearing a little bit through this process. And, you know, one is that, you know, like I think you mentioned early on, Susan, like looking back, it looks like it's all been planned from the beginning, right? But that probably wasn't the case, right? So you learned a lot along the way. So, but what you did is you developed your North Star early, right? And so, I love the simplicity of the three areas. And then, so like that's, you know where you're going, you have your vehicle, right? But the vehicle doesn't have doors, it doesn't have windshield wipers, you know, we're all in it and we're like, we know where we want to go. But then like you're asking the right questions along the way. Like the workshop model is a great example. So you ask, what's the behavior we're engaging in that demonstrates what we believe, right? Demonstrates this. And then, oh, it's a workshop model. So then we put the doors on the car, right? And then you're asking these questions as you go. And I love this idea of talent development. So you're actually saying the behaviors look like this, and we are providing our people with the knowledge skills to do those things, right? And so you're putting more things on that vehicle as you move towards that North Star. So you weren't afraid to say, we don't know it all, but we know we're going to learn along the way. So I think that's super important. So
thank you, Ben. All right, Laura.
All righty, so then that led to defenses of learning. And as you saw in that strategic plan, first it was asking seniors to do defenses. And here you see pictures of how it developed. Then it was at 5th, the transition levels, defending, moving from 5th into 6th, and then from 8th into high school. And so you see evidence and teachers tweeting about what students are doing in their defenses. I'm particularly proud of this UK Next Gen learner, Amy Chase, who's talking about her students who were actually presenting their data at their own IEP ARC meetings in special education. They knew their data well enough to defend their learning to their parents in the ARC meetings. And so you see anyone.
ARC is an IEP meeting for those not in Kentucky. Sorry, Laura, that's super Kentucky language.
Yeah, I was trying to kind of, they knew their data, even exceptional learners knew. And then you have the school teams and then schools all tweeting about how their defenses are going and how it connects to the profile and the culmination of learning for those benchmark years that we determined. Anything else about defenses? So last week I saw this on Twitter, and Susan and I were planning this. We were talking about the importance of not, the community owning and expecting. And this was a tweet that an instructional coach tweeted with a parent talking about seeing their senior defend. Susan, you want to try that? And if it doesn't work, I think I've got it.
I don't think I have Twitter installed on this computer I'm using,
All
so
right.
I don't know if it'll play from mine.
All right, let me see if I can do it real quick.
Okay.
Hopefully, tell me if you don't hear. I probably didn't do what I needed.
I really enjoyed with
Did
it.
you hear it?
Seeing the things that
we
he's
can hear.
talking about the years, throughout his 4 years in high school here. And they were things that I don't necessarily see from a daily basis. With a typical high school student, a parent doesn't necessarily get into their schoolwork and do that like they would in elementary school and things. So seeing how much he articulated everything, it was a really proud moment for me being a parent.
That's awesome. Did he surprise you with anything that he talked about today?
He absolutely did. There were several things that, as a parent of a teenager, it can be very difficult. And then there were several things that I was like, wow, he actually listens to me. So I was really proud. It was one of those. It's one of those moments where I'm like, I'm not going to cry. You're a man. You're not going to cry. But I didn't. But it was hard. I really enjoyed with it, just seeing the things.
All right, so that I just thought that was a powerful documentation of a parent's response to defense. So, tools. What tools did we use? So when we first created the profile, we had, I think Carmen said this Tuesday too, we had words up there, and we realized really quickly that we needed to articulate what those words meant. And so when we talk about being a responsible collaborator, what does that look and sound like? And because we were already on the path to the academic competency or the academic standards side, we were moving towards standards-based grading and doing lots of professional learning around that. And to support teachers and students and parents alike, we developed mastery scales, which were articulations of the standard and learning progressions toward priority standards. And so with those mastery scales, not only teachers were able to better lesson plan and get to clarity on what mastery was. But students could also look at those and then have clarity about where they were going and be able to use their agency as learners to say, I'm really in developing still, I need to do mastery, and here's what it is I have to get to approaching mastery, and here's what I need to do next. And you will often hear students talk about where I am in my learning progression for a standard. So that was important in helping students to understand that. And then at the level of the profile of a graduate, we articulated those benchmarks for those defense years. So we had level 5 and 8 and 12, and we decided to do one at level 2 also. So we articulated performance outcomes for each of the competencies on our profile. And then again, very much like the academic competencies, help them to see and think about what it looks like and sounds like when I'm doing this as a 2nd grader or when I'm doing this as a 5th grader. You want to jump in on any of that? Oh, and the other thing is that I wanted to say, one of our other colleagues that some of you may know, Rebecca Martin, was leading a lot of this work to develop these scales and things. And she always says, and I think she might be out there in San Diego right now leading a session on this, but she always says it wasn't either or. It's not just looking at academic competencies or just looking at the profile, but it was both and. And I think that reminded me, Janelle, you were saying something similar. You know, we have to think about both things and where those things are getting us. And so for professional learning, as I said, we started doing parallel training. We started developing clear strands for teachers. We had teachers think about, we connected the teacher leader and the teacher standards to our profile. We named where the Kentucky State Teacher Standards aligned with our profile to help teachers to make those connections. And then we allowed teachers to prioritize their learning and where they were in the different strands. Am I just learning about, as a new teacher, the foundations of what's happening in Shelby County? Or am I really working on principles of CBE culture because I've developed my knowledge and practice to that point? So teachers were able to access their learning and use their agency to make choices about professional learning also.
And then one of the big things that needed to happen in order to keep this journey moving was to put some things in policy. So this is just a brief quote from the graduation policy that in Shelby County, that students must successfully complete a defensive learning, including evidence of the profile competencies and a post-secondary plan, along with all the others. So that is a policy. And there's a great process in Shelby County for panelists and resubmission and criteria that must be met to successfully complete those. And then the other policies around PLPs, personalized learning plans, scheduling, grouping, advisory, all those things became a part of board policy. And our board was very supportive of this work because they too, I didn't mention them as co-creators, but they were also co-creators in the process all along the way, from visiting schools to creating the profile and the strategic plan, all the way to creating their annual board goals around the competencies of our profile. And just to kind of finish it out about where are they now? This is just a couple of months ago. I love being on Twitter and seeing exhibitions happening and the competencies named, and you see there from kindergarten to high school, things still happening there, and even more intentionally in some ways happening in the schools in Shelby County. And I am fortunate to live in Shelby County and have several of my own kids teaching there. And it's really good to hear those stories about what's going on. So one of the things that happened last year is, so you know that first strategic plan ended in 2022. So this one began this year, and this is the public facing, not every single little action like you saw on the other one. But you can see that the vision statement remains. There are still 3 areas, and they're really similar to the ones before: inspired learning, inspired leading, and inspired living. How you do things, the leaders, the teacher leaders, and then the learning at the top. And you can still see that the core outcomes and strategies, the second one, for instance, students demonstrate the profile. They have transition level defenses that they develop and exhibit the profile. So those things are all still part of the core of Shelby County Public Schools. And the leaders there are doing an amazing job of moving that forward. And it's very satisfying for us to see that it's in this 4-year plan. So it continues to live and grow and get better and better every year. These are things just from a week ago. You saw some things. You met our Painted Stone friends and East Middle friends, and defenses are in full swing at every area. And we're really excited to see that happening. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Justin, I know you have the time frame in your head. So we are available for questions and reflections if you all have any, and you can monitor that as you need to.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot there, I know, right? And everyone is like, wow, that's a lot. It is. I don't want to dismiss how much work went into it. It was a lot of work, wasn't it? And over the course of multiple years, as Laura said at the beginning, like, this is not a, you don't do this in 6 months and it's over. This is a complete transformation of how a school district does business. And that is hard and takes time. But you can see that the foundational pieces of how to do that transformation is a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, right? It's how then the leadership of a school district, the folks in the room and a few others, began to be strategic about this happens first, this happens second. Then we're going to implement defenses. Then we're going to bring exhibitions in. Like that, all of the sort of leadership component of that is critical as you start to bring it all together. Thoughts or questions? And it's not like learning is magical in Shelby County every single day. We got to see Painted Stone earlier with some great exhibitions. The students, it's not high tech high every single day in Shelby County. No offense not to the team in the room, but they've laid a foundation that lets projects happen way more often. It's now part of the DNA, and it really can't go away. And like that is a much better place to be than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when it was just all about getting a score on a test. And, that's how we measured quality in our world.
I think it's important to sort of when we kicked it off, I think it was Laura who mentioned like the importance of, shifting your teaching and learning model with your teachers to this type of learning. So you were modeling like, this is how we do teaching and learning here. And I've seen that over and over again. We talk about learning organizations. It's not the organization itself becomes a learning organization, and people engage in the behaviors and the ways that we want teaching and learning to take place. It's just how we do it. And so when people engage that way, it becomes how we do business. So I think that's a really important piece. And I think a lot, and in doing so, you named like what these aspirational things that we want to achieve, but then you actually assigned behaviors to those things and ways of doing things. And then you assign people to those things, right? And then you provided the professional learning to, I love that talent development term you use, to help people do that, right? So it can be kind of scary. So with the approach of our what school could be mantra, like small steps to big change, people are thinking, wow, how do I do this? It might be overwhelming thinking about all of this. So, what are some high leverage first steps that you might think about suggesting to people? It might not even be, it might just be pulling people together. It might be a specific tool. It might be asking specific questions, like what's the instructional model? That was such a beautiful question. If you think about what is a small step someone might take?
Okay, let's all name one, the three of us. Okay, so my small step is just do it. So pick one thing, and like I would pick, and I tell people what we're working with now, I would pick exhibitions. Every kid has something that they've learned at school, at home, so on YouTube. Everyone can celebrate and reflect on learning. And if you start to value that and celebrate it, that can be a great first step, not just for the kid, but for the teachers, for the parents, for the community, that they see the celebration of learning, but they also see the capabilities of kids they may not know. So that would be mine.
Mine would be to collaborate. We would be sitting there reading a book, telling us how to do this, and we would go, let's call them, let's ask. So I vividly remember calling Justin Wells or calling Bob Lenz, who told me to talk to Justin Wells. It's like, don't, doesn't matter who, ask them, they will help you. And we will likewise do the same, because in collaborating and figuring out and listening to how others, made their steps helps you to think about what your steps are. Not that you totally replicate it, but you look at the different examples and try them.
Yeah, I like both of those a lot. And those might be better than anything I have to say, but the part that came to my mind was when we started asking kids, how do you know you do good work? That was, to me, a really easy entry point that just shed a lot of light on the shifts that we needed to make. I can remember asking kids, how do you know you do good work? And the answers were sad, really, Ben, because all the answers were about what the adults tell me. And so that's one that really stands out to me.
That's great. And so centering the learning, I think, Susan, your answer was centering the learning. And I love how it's like, let's talk about learning, not what the teacher wants you to say or not what the teacher wants you to learn, but more broadly, like we want to know about you as a learner. So you're actually giving students more agency there. And Laura, most people think a lot of this work feels lonely, right? But like, I love it. Like, just send an email, reach out on Twitter, just go to the source. So I think that's beautiful. And I think thinking about our next sprint, we're moving into one small step, right? What's that one small step? One small step could literally be sending an email. Like, that's what we're talking about. Or, collaborating with somebody in your district. I'm sending an email to that person, or setting a meeting, or, that's like, those are the small steps we're actually talking about, but we're talking about just sort of thinking about doing something and then taking action on that thought. So yeah, and I love that. How do you know you do good work, James? Again, centering that learning and actually holding the kids accountable to themselves almost, which is pretty awesome.
All right, team. Thank you, Shelby County, for sharing and giving a sense of yes, you can scale this to a district of 6,000 kids and start to impact thousands of kids at a time, not just sort of small school situations that we are used to seeing. So awesome. Thank you, guys. That feels hopeful to me, but I want to do one more hopeful thing before we wrap up sprint number 2. And I know that one of the major limitations of this work is around the scaling problem. Everybody gets freaked out about the scaling problem. So in the Padlet first, before I do that, there are tons of tools. As Susan mentioned, they were relying a lot on the Center for Collaborative Education. We do too. We love their quality performance assessment guide for schools and districts. It's spectacular. I actually have a downloaded copy of this in the Padlet. It's a little bit illegal. It is recorded. I'm sorry, CCE. CCE's website hasn't been updated in a couple of years, so it's a little harder to use right now. So I just went ahead and put a link to it in there. In there's all kinds of things we love, like the Cookie Monster protocol. Like, not all cookies are created equal. How do we distinguish what's good quality work from a student versus medium quality work? Great protocols on that, how to calibrate everybody so we're sort of assessing in the same way. Student work analysis and how to sit down with a team of educators and really analyze the quality of student work and how that can improve where there's weaknesses and strengths. There's a lot of additional stuff down this road. All the stuff down towards mastery-based grading, mastery, that whole world of mastery lives down this road. Standards-based grading lives down this road. The mastery transcript lives down this road. So I put in the Padlet lots of additional links that you can just go and play with, because this is the road that takes you to all of those fun, amazing places that you might want to go someday. But to get there, for most schools, it's a journey, and Susan laid out that step-by-step journey. Like, that's like, don't take on standards-based grading right off the bat if you haven't built in any kind of a performance assessment structure. You're just finding a new way to label an old thing. And so you have to actually change the equation. So you'll get to all those things, but it's down that road. So I've got lots of those links. Okay, here's the thing that everyone gets hung up on, though, is like, but wait a second, I'm still being held accountable to the test, right? The test for us in the United States is we can't get around this kind of situation. And I want to give you a hopeful tone on this. The Aurora Institute took over a group called Competency Works. Competency Works was doing the absolute best work on this entire domain going on. And so Aurora Institute has taken that on. This is a United States picture of states that are making some progress on competency-based education. And red in this scenario is good. So I don't know why red is good. So lots of states are trying to work on this. I put in the Padlet, there's a whole column of states that are trying to work on this and the different efforts that are taking shape across different states. I want to zoom in on one, Massachusetts. And I know Massachusetts is the state that frequently in the United States, we're like, oh God, we don't want to hear about Massachusetts. But I know, and I'm sorry, but they're doing some cool stuff I want to share because it's hopeful. They have this group called the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment, and they've got 10 districts committed to it, but that includes Boston, it includes Lowell. These are major cities in Massachusetts. And that consortium does a lot of different things, professional learning, coaching, focus groups, but they also do two really important things that I think are critically useful and I want to see more places do. But the fact that these things are existing in the world in multiple places, I think I find a lot of hope in. If you're into this, a guy named Jack Schneider, I linked it up in the Padlet, is sort of the brains behind this operation. There's multiple contributors, of course, but he's a professor at UMass Lowell, and he's in this video. We'll just take a quick look.
For the past 20 years, we've been using data mainly to punish schools and to threaten schools. One of our big goals is to be a lighthouse, to show what can be accomplished.
MCIA is the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment. We're looking at different ways to understand school quality.
Our goal is to show people that there is actually an alternative way of measuring student learning.
There's two issues that we're trying to solve. One is that the data that comes from state-mandated tests often is not particularly useful. The second problem comes in is that it's provided months after the fact. We want to offer that alternative so that parents can make better decisions about where they're sending their kid to school. What we've developed is a user-friendly, engaging online interface so that they can quickly understand what's an area of strength for my school and what's an area of improvement. The VMware Tanzu Act team was outstanding for every step of the process.
I got to see a team of people who knew.
Okay, we'll stop there. They talk a little about the technology they're using to do this job. And I've got slides, but maybe it would be more useful if I just slide the Padlet over. And in this blue column, the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovative Educational Assessment is a couple of the critical tools I want to show you. So the first of those tools is their Performance Assessment Test Bank. This is a serious bank of performance tasks that you all can explore, play with, sort, find for your own useful purposes. Hopefully it's loading, okay. And you can see, you can filter it by grade level, right? So if you're hanging out in the 6th grade and you're looking for some projects that make sense in the 6th grade that are linked to performance tasks as well as rubrics, here's a bunch of them: cells, insects, storytelling and music, culture, water rockets, planning a vacation, math shopping. I don't know, it goes on for a while. Ancient Egyptian achievements, design projects, personal finance. So that's quite a bit of depth. Let's check out personal finance. They actually have that one a little bit older, but inside of that, you can see there's task templates, rubrics, rubrics even linked to IB if you are into the International Baccalaureate world. And that will hopefully pop up. Here it's popping up. A sort of deep dive into what's going on, how it links to standards, the summary of the task, the essential questions, the actual output, the task, the thing they're building is in there, and then more potential links. All right, that is a deep dive that you can play with just to go check out lots of examples. The other thing, though, that the more hopeful thing that I want to share is their school performance dashboard. School quality measurement dashboard. This is a serious school accountability alternative that's developing that I'm a pretty big fan of. They're choosing to measure other things in other ways. So they're trying to measure sort of the quality of teachers and leaders, the school culture, the resources that are in place and being provided for kids, the academic learning. So academics are not gone, they're still there. Community and well-being. So you can sort of select a district and then you can select a school. We'll check out Butler Middle School. And that then pops open a tool that shows a lot about what's going on at that school. And you can see this school has some room for growth. It's meeting a bunch of personal qualification standards, effective practices, and school leadership. All of these are clickable, and it will tell you more about how they got to that particular category. This one's relying a lot on teacher surveys. So that is what happens when you click into any one of these. But I love the beauty of this chart. Like morning watch, growth, approval, ideal. And down this line is like, these are some things that we are strong at. And these are some things where, as a particular school, we need to get better at. And then there is an overall score. And so this school is a bit of a struggling school. But the picture of struggling is a lot more nuanced and detailed than just a test score, right? There's a lot of reasons behind a struggling school's test score. But here you get some depth about like what's going on and why are we concerned about particular measures at a school level. And then you can analyze that data, all these different categories. And then even inside of here, like if you really want to play with the data, you can go back in time, see multiple years. I don't know if you know Tableau as a data system, but this reminds me of Tableau in terms of data display. And you can break that out also by student population subgroups, stuff like that, or grade level. You can play with the data to really get a sense of, how is this school doing? Now, look, all of this is not the Massachusetts-wide accountability model yet, but can you begin to see how we build? We're building, we're taking very basic tools, exhibitions, defenses, performance assessments. We're building a performance assessment model around those performance tools. And that model then helps us inform deeper measures of school quality in terms of school accountability. So these pieces are building on each other at this point, to the point that it's in this series of pieces that we can build a new operational model for how school works, because assessment and accountability is always the key to unlocking change. And so this series of steps, this series of plays is what is going to take us eventually to a new way of doing school accountability. And everyone can just, I don't think test scores will ever be completely absent from that equation. I think test scores will have a role to play, but there are many other useful things that have a role to play, particularly around competencies that we want for kids that are defined by your portrait of a graduate. So when we get back together for the last sprint, we'll dive into that portrait of a graduate and how those things get built, why they're being built, the level of depth to which you need to build them. Like it's a portrait of a graduate, but it must have defined competencies. And so we'll talk about how you get to the depth of competencies, because competencies is then what we can begin to measure. So all of that is what we'll begin to unpack together in our last sprint. And that starts in 2 weeks. So Ben, take us home.
Yeah, okay. I know everybody's got to run and we are at time. So on the Padlet, there's two things. I dropped in the chat the feedback form for Sprint 2. Please fill that out. We really do listen to your feedback and make adjustments as we can. The second thing we'd like to do is to hear a little bit of your reflection. And so we don't have time to get together in groups to do this, but we can do this after we close the call. So it shouldn't take you very long. And that is just on the Padlet, you'll see a green reflection space. And it's just as last time. So 3 words to describe your experience, 2 sentences to summarize your learning, and 1 feeling that you're leaving with. So you just leave that as a comment on the Padlet so we can sort of gauge where you're at and how we can better support you. And one other thing we wanted to mention before we break is if in the next 2 weeks, we won't be meeting. And if during that time, if you want to reach out to Justin or I for like a one-on-one 30-minute conversation, if you have some questions or you just want to talk through something in a more intimate format, or you want just to bounce ideas, reach out to us and we can hop on a quick call at a convenient time and just have like an informal, almost coaching conversation. So we're more than happy to do that with anybody who's interested. So with that, please do the reflection. It helps us, it helps you. Fill out that feedback form. And then anything else before we shut this down for today?
Are you feeling a little bit hopeful? That was my goal for today, to feel a little hopeful.